Welcome to the life of a global Desi.
A podcast that connects like minded Desis all over the globe by conforming to stereotypes and breaking them.
Introducing Life of a Global Desi interviews.
Yes, we bring to you our conversations with remarkable global Desis who are doing some really cool things in life.
The idea is to bring fresh perspectives, add diverse voices, and expand the global Desi community. On to our episode now. The guest on today's episode is Vikas Plakkot, who's a slow travel enthusiast. Vikas identifies as being pretty uncool. He won't get many tattoos in life, but he absolutely believes he'll get his passport well tattooed. Vikas is the co-founder of Just for Kicks, a program that teaches valuable life skills to children from the poorest backgrounds in India through football and sport. After 9 years of building the organization, Vikas recently transitioned out and is in the process of identifying the next big adventure to embark on. Vikas finds comfort in words, something that has led him to be a travel writer for various publications, including the National Geographic magazine. Originally from Kerala, Vikas is based in Bangalore but identifies as a citizen of the world. He's also an avid quizzer, a sports fanatic, a food geek, and an amateur home cook. Let's find out more about Vikas. Hi everyone. We have a very special guest with us today. Everyone, please welcome Vikas Plakkot. Hey, Vikas.
Woohoo!
Hey, so good to be here.
So good to have you. Quick context for the listeners. Vikas and I were co-fellows between 2011 to 2013 in the Teach for India Fellowship. Between the two of us, we were teaching about 60 kids, and all of these kids were between the ages of 6 to 7, so you can imagine how much fun that was. And I was teaching English and math. Vikas taught social science and social studies and science, and we would interchange these classes a lot. I remember the most of the time we were spending on building pretty detailed lesson plans, grading what seemed like endless papers and exams, and all of this over numerous cups of chai, vada pav, and poha in Pune, right, Vikas?
And some tandoori chicken as well.
And tandoori chicken as well, absolutely, outside that dhaba near the school on that highway. Definitely seems like a long time ago. Our kids have come a long way. The journey was both very transformational, fulfilling, but also, pretty testing at a lot of times. But I think the good thing was I always had Vikas as a co-teacher. So for me, that was the only way I could make it through. So thank you, Vikas, for that.
Likewise.
Yeah, awesome. So,
Oh, you guys.
so that's how I know Vikas.
That
But
was so
Aarti,
sweet.
I don't think Aarti knew Vikas back then, but I think she visited our class, right, Aarti?
Yeah, so I know Vikas by having visited your classroom, and it was just so beautiful watching you guys do your thing. And
Yeah, attempting to be good teachers.
yes.
Hopefully.
It was
I
very
remember
early
your
on in
visit
your
very
journey.
well.
Yes. So this is more for like myself and the listeners. We're gonna have an icebreaker. So Vikas, here's the question. On a scale of 1 to 10, how weird are you and why?
Oh, well, I'd absolutely say 8. Definitely on the higher end of weird because as my life choices have indicated, I don't do the normal stuff. I don't get the joy out of it. I just get a lot of high from doing things that are out of whack. So I guess I am weird like that in all forms of life.
I love that. I love that. And I see that when I follow you on, social media, on Facebook. So I have been actually very closely following you on LinkedIn and Facebook for a while now.
Stalking almost.
Yeah, stalking almost. So been following your professional journey, and as the only girl on the basketball court or on the football field growing up, I absolutely admire what you have done with Just for Kicks. So for our listeners, can you just tell us what was your journey like co-founding Just for Kicks and what it stands for?
Sure. I guess the idea began in the classroom that we talked about already. The kids that Achana and I were teaching. Working with those kids, we realized very quickly that it's important for us to leave them with things that are beyond academics. While I was teaching social science and science, those were not long-lasting, lessons I could leave them with. But I could definitely leave them with life skills that they could take forward in their lives, right? So that's kind of where the core of the idea comes from. And growing up, playing a lot of sport, having gone to school purely because I got to play, I figured very early that sport might be a good idea to try this out. And so we went to football because I played football, but also because it's a team sport, it's a global sport, people understand the sport, and kids love playing football across the world. So we mixed the two ideas to use football to teach life skills, and it worked. It worked in our class as well. Some of the naughtiest kids did get a lot more invested in the school, and we were able to work with them a lot better. So it worked in our class, and then, it's just been an organic journey, to be honest, from going from my class to more classrooms. More and more teachers wanting the program in their schools, which kept happening, and we were lucky enough to be able to raise the capital to be able to do that. And then from then on, it's been a journey of trying to grow that and get it to as many kids as possible. I think by now we've touched about 6,000 kids actively.
That's fantastic.
All of whom have at least been there for 3 years in the program. So, and now recently we launched Cambodia. So we're looking beyond India and looking at it as a global problem that we could play a role in solving.
Yeah, I do remember, Vikas, you as being a pretty big football fan. Through the the few minutes that we would get in between classes, you would be following the matches pretty rigorously, and seeing which club won and what's happening. And I think the kids definitely got that passion infused from you. When I saw it, obviously in the classroom, but also on the field. So that was pretty incredible.
To get to know you a little better, what are some identities that you strongly associate with, and what were your early influences growing up? This could be like which part of the globe, or like the places that influenced you, books, people, socioeconomic class that you associate with or you come from.
Right. That's an interesting question. I don't think I've spoken much about it out loud as such, so it's interesting for me to reflect on it as well. But for me, growing up, geography books were very, very, very close to me. I had like some 12 books that were just atlases of different kinds. I had like 2 different globes in the house and a huge map. And my dad used to subscribe to, like the Sterling Resorts books. He was a member of some resort company, and they used to, have these books which come home, but it's all of the affiliated resorts around the world. And I would love flipping through it, like literally looking at every single resort on it. I would look at some resort in Athens and I'd be like, oh, someday, how cool would that be? Awesome. So I have always had a huge geographical influence around me, which played a lot in my life growing up, because I used to quiz a lot, most of it on social science and travel quizzes. So those were big parts of my life growing up. Obviously, sport has been another key lever in who I've been, because watching not just sport in India, right? Following sport around the world, it makes you feel like you have an insight into the whole world. So I think all of it together, I see myself as, a global citizen of sorts. As much as I love India and the feeling of India, I have the same feeling, to be honest, for most of the countries that I've been to and I've had the opportunity of spending time in. I do not feel like the other countries are lesser or more. I just look at everything as the same, and I'm always fascinated by new things and new places. So I think that's my core identity, which kind of plays out into how my professional life plays out or my personal life plays out. But yeah, some of the key influences have always been books, especially geography books. Reading also books on geography, like fiction on geography, on travel and stuff like that is what I grew up on. So that's obviously got a huge influence in my life.
That's fascinating. And I think for me personally, I tapped into that, one thing in your childhood that makes you the person you are, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons we have you on this episode, and we're really excited to share more, ask you more about the journey there, geography, travel. And honestly, for me, Vikas, you have made this concept of slow travel so fashionable. now, right? It's not the age anymore about just being a tourist, right? Being a tourist is very different from being a traveler when we think about it. It's not about the number of countries you've been to, or just getting pictures and selfies at the most popular places. So tell us a little bit more about why did you decide to start traveling slowly and deliberately, and what is travel, and why do you think it's something that you've gravitated towards?
I'd say very naturally, I've always gravitated towards slow travel. But obviously, being citizens of the third world, so to say, global south, if I may say, we don't have a powerful passport. We don't have passport privileges. We don't have economic privileges either. The amount of money we make doesn't go a long way abroad. So these factors obviously play in how people travel in our country, at least as Indians or even as Asians. And hence, all my initial travel thoughts were always, while I wanted to spend a long time in places and understanding places, it wasn't really an option. And I'm assuming it still is not an option for a lot of people. So, but as I've traveled more and more, I've begun to realize that I would much rather know one place in depth than know many more places shallow. It doesn't leave an indelible mark on me when I go to places and I'm just constantly hopping. But I mean, I would say there is still a sense of wonder. I don't want to take away from that because I know a lot of people can only be tourists because of the situations that they're in their lives. But
Yep.
I do have those moments where I'm in a very popular place in some part of the world, a big monument, and I'm still having a sense of wonder. But that's not enough for me. It doesn't give me what I seek from traveling, which is to truly feel I have left a mark on a place and a place has left a mark on me that I can carry with me. So for me, like it's always been something that I've slowly gravitated towards the idea of spending a long time immersing myself in a place and understanding the place without really having a specific agenda of seeing X, Y, or Z. A lot of times, if I can give an example, I was in Sarajevo in Bosnia last year. As part of a long journey I was on. And when I stopped in Sarajevo, I had no plans of when I was starting or leaving. But
That's
I,
crazy.
I ended up spending like 8 nights there in Sarajevo. Sarajevo is a really small city. If you actually look up at things to do, you can finish it off in 24 hours. Most of the people in my hostel were coming in and going in 24 hours. It's also not a big party location or anything, so there's not like a huge influx of travelers there. But for me, like going to the same place for the same sunset and watching just different sets of people come there, going to the same coffee shop and having that same Bosnian coffee over and over, those are things that I look forward to. That to the point that the day I'm leaving, I want the coffee shop owner to feel like, oh, you'll be missed, right? And that makes me feel like there's a part of me in Sarajevo and there's a part of Sarajevo in me. And that's kind of what I seek now because that truly helps me get the maximum out of my traveling experiences. So, yeah, that's how I would say I've ended up slow traveling more and more.
Got it. That's so helpful, and I think gives us an insight in terms of what draws you to slow travel, right? The fact that you can assimilate into a locality or just the local culture, super fascinating. How do you pick the places that you go to? I've heard, and again, I read your blog, right, where, you're in Kazakhstan and Bosnia. You're often picking places which are not in the mainstream, right? And you're making them mainstream. So how do you pick those?
That's a good question. I think part of it is the influence I told you about earlier, which is like I've grown up around maps. So for me, like every place is in my head somewhere that I'm kind of connecting to from some part of my childhood. But I think more importantly, I seek stories. That's what I travel for, right? I'm not seeking to get a great Instagram photo or a photo that I can frame up in my bedside table. That's not what I'm seeking when I'm traveling. Or I'm not relaxing either. And I want to be very honest about it. For me, traveling is not about relaxing. For me, it's about stories. And as many stories as I can collect, I feel the experience is complete. Which is how I end up picking some of the places I pick, because these are stories that are not told. And stories that are told are not the ones that excite me. It's the untold stories that excite me, the ones I get to say once I get experience. And I feel they're truly mine. Which is a selfish thought, to be honest, but it does at some level help me or gravitate me towards places that are not the most obvious choices of traveling. But yeah, I mean, those are the places that have also had the most impact on me. So, naturally, I'm doing that more and more. For example, Ethiopia is the planet's favorite destination for me, and I don't think a lot of people would say that sentence.
Wow.
But I just love the feeling of being there, so far out from civilization, in what is kind of the cradle of humankind. The very first ancestor came from Ethiopia. So for me, like those kind of places have a huge impact, and hence I keep picking those places more and more, and my experiences feel more complete when I do that.
That's gorgeous. That's absolutely gorgeous. So you alluded to storytelling, right? And you're a travel blogger. What drew you to writing about these stories, and what's your relationship with like writing as a form of expression and storytelling versus say any other form?
Right. I guess words are my way of communicating everything and anything in my life. I don't really have many other languages I can use that I'm good at. I naturally tend to speak better than any other way, or express better through words than any other way. So for me, if I if I need to remember the experience myself and put it down somewhere that I can look back at, for me that is ideally in words, which is how I have gotten into writing. And as a child, I did have a blog that was not writing on travel, but I did write, and Archana probably has read some of the blogs that I used to write when I was in the fellowship as well. They're more life thoughts, life experiences, some poems, stuff like that. So I've always had an interest in writing. But then my love for travel and my love for writing somewhere found each other, and hence now I use that form of expression to bring the stories, the untold stories that I talked about, to people and tell them to people. So that's kind of how I have ended up being there. But I wouldn't call myself a blogger anymore, at least. I think I've slowly moved away from that, and I just feel there's a lot more value in writing more expressive pieces, more research-oriented pieces, where I can, blend in my love for history, my love for general, knowledge around the world and stuff like that, and put it into a piece, an article, which is what I enjoy by doing more of the journalism work that I'm doing now, writing for a lot of different magazines like Travel and Leisure or National Geographic. I truly enjoy that, and so for me, that's kind of the crux of how I've ended up in this space. But yeah, I wouldn't use the word blogger for myself anymore.
But that's incredible still, right? Like getting till there, getting to even like blog for, National Geographic. That sounds so fascinating. So I am personally on a journey to become a better writer. I was curious to know, like, what are some resources that help you become like a better writer, and what was it like blogging or like writing for National Geographic? How do you get there? What was your journey?
Yeah, how do you even
start?
like ask NGC to publish one of your pieces of writing?
Okay, that's a tough one. But if I have to give advice on how to get better at writing, I would say just write. That's my honestly only advice. The only way to get better at writing is if you write more and more and have more people reading more and more of what you write. And you can see what people's reactions are to those, how people respond to those, how you feel about it yourself while reading it. And the more you write, the more you get better at it. So that's definitely the best way of learning to write better. But I would also say, learning to storyboard is very critical in being able to be a good writer, because you can, it's if you just sit down and simply write without thinking about what am I writing, what's the story that I'm trying to say, it doesn't really tell the right story. So first for me, I always storyboard. What is the angle that I'm talking about? I don't need to say everything in my pieces. I can say the things that matter the most only. And that brings the story together. So storyboarding is an exercise that I would say helps you in becoming a better writer for sure.
Got it. I also feel like there's a little bit of your experience being a teacher and being in the classroom in terms of storyboarding, right? So do you think there's skills that you picked up in the classroom that help you be a more expressive writer, more journalistic writer?
Yeah, I mean, the classroom has been kind of a lab for me, and I value that to that extent. Right from what I do professionally to my life of travel and travel writing, everything's found some sort of inspiration from the classroom and working with the kids and being a teacher, like you said, constantly creating plans, telling stories, trying to see how best to convey the same idea to a kid does make you really better at what story to tell. So yeah, I'm pretty sure it's had an influence on me.
What is a common myth about slow travel, right? Going back to this idea of immersing in a culture fully and really soaking it in, being a traveler. What is a common myth about slow travel, and can you debunk it?
Well, I feel like one of the common myths is the slow travel is the idea of traveling for a long period of time, where you have to be away from your job and life, and have a lot of money to be able to do that. So people have started looking at like sabbaticals or like long-term travels as slow travel, but slow travel doesn't have to be that. If you only have 10 days or if you only have 14 days, the idea is what do I use those 10 or 14 days to such that the experience is more complete. So for me, for example, if I was to say I have a 14-day window to travel, you have two choices. You could go on a trip to 5 countries and have multiple experiences in these different countries, or you could go to even one country and keep hopping every 3 days. But I would rather do 14 days in just one spot, even if that's just 14 days. So the idea is not how much time do you have on your hand, it's about how are you utilizing that time. And what experiences are you spending that time down to that truly makes you a slow traveler. So if you're going to Turkey and you're just spending 14 days in Istanbul and you're saying, I don't want to see the rest of Turkey, I don't have the time today, I appreciate that. But these 14 days I'm going to be here and immerse myself truly into Istanbul itself, I think that's equally slow travel as much as probably spending 4 months in Turkey, seeing length and breadth of it. So yeah, it's not the duration that matters. It's kind of what you make of it.
No, that makes absolute sense. It's about what you're trying to prioritize, and seems like in your case, you're prioritizing in-depth experience versus a breadth of experiences across different countries.
But I would say, Archana, one thing here, the key thing that I would say is something that keeps people off from doing it is FOMO. People don't imagine like you're taking a flight halfway across the world. And you've got your visas, you've put all that effort into getting those visas. You probably are never going to go back to this place again. You probably won't find the time to do it. Given all of those probabilities, you want to make the maximum in terms of, I want to see everything this country is famous for. But being able to tell yourself that it doesn't matter, that I see every single thing. What it matters is what those 14 days leaves me with and what memories I take back and what stories I take back. That takes a while, to be honest. It wasn't something that I could do in the beginning. I really, really struggled with it too. And it would drive me crazy as well because I want to have all of those experiences, but I also don't like it. So it's kind of a conundrum, and I know a lot of people feel that. When they hear the word slow travel, they kind of fear this idea of like, oh, I'm going to miss out. But I guess that's a priority that you have to decide for yourself and get comfortable with doing. And once you do it in one place, that, you know what, I'm actually now going to go to this really famous monument or place, and I'm going to see what I feel like, you probably will realize, nothing really changes and you still have as rich an experience to take back as you would have had or more. As you would have had if you went to that place. So I think there's a leap of faith involved before people can truly embrace slow travel.
Absolutely agree, because I mean, while you were talking, it took me back to some of the most, popular world destinations. What comes to my mind is Eiffel Tower, right? As soon as I arrived there, I'd been thinking about it all my life. And when I came there, it was a pretty anticlimactic moment, right? It was almost like, it's interesting, but well, that was that.
Yeah.
I hear you though.
Yeah, totally.
But, yeah. And some of the more fun parts were just, chilling in the cafes all day and really spending a whole day doing nothing, not going to the most favorite place, most popular places, but just, looking at Parisians do their daily stuff. So
yeah, I guess you probably know what Parisians do and what Parisian life is like better than the people who just ended up going to Eiffel Tower. They probably have better pictures than you do, but yeah.
For sure. I'm pretty sure. Yeah, because the day I went, it was foggy, rainy, and it was one of the most dreary days to be in Paris. But, we made the most of it.
The other angle of it is also to be able to actually have that first experience clocked in, I would say, because you can't make this shift unless you actually know what the value of this is. As much as I can say stories, as much as I can, make people feel like, oh, my experiences have been amazing. Unless you actually experience it, you're not going to really realize how amazing it is. And what the beauty of truly living in a place and embracing that life of the place is. Having that coffee shop owner get your WhatsApp number and message you 2 weeks later. the feeling is something else. But unless you do it, you're not going to know it. So I would say that begin with the place, take that leap of faith, embrace the FOMO, and then see where it goes. If you don't like it, honestly, that's okay. That's who you are. That's probably what floats your boat. But at least if you want to, then the only way to do it is to do it. And to just literally go in, knowing that it's not going to be the best feeling in the beginning as you plan and prepare for this trip, because you're constantly going to be thinking about everything that you probably won't have on your Instagram later. But I think once you finish that experience and come back and have these plenty of people that you're connected with and have these places that you're connected to, when you get a cup of coffee in the morning back home, you will realize the value of it.
Yeah, I think what you said there is really important, right, in terms of slowing down. And that's a lesson we can take in all spheres of our life. I feel like we have FOMO in at work, at home, and in our relationships. And I think we're almost always trying to multitask, including in our travel. So hopefully what you said there about slow travel will translate and can translate in positive ways in other spheres of all our lives, right? So thanks for sharing that. That's very, very helpful.
Absolutely. It reminds me of the book The Art of Stillness by Pico Iyer. I'm not sure if you read it, but similar in concept and talks about similar things. He has a TED Talk also where he talks about kind of like slow travel. But yeah, you just reminded, like everything you were saying reminded me of him. But I had like a question around stories and storytelling and also your experiences. What are your top 3 favorite places that you have traveled to or slow traveled to, and what are some of your favorite stories that you can share with us from there? It could be really mundane as well, but just what are your favorite thing about those places?
That's like the one question you should not ask someone who loves to travel, because it's so hard to pick.
It's like picking between your children, I suppose, right?
Yeah, it really is. Honestly, I end up loving every single place, even like where I've had experiences of theft and stuff. I still love that place. So I would say I do love most of the places that I've ever been to. But having said that, I think the experiences that I would keep the closest to my heart, one would be driving around South Africa. That wasn't a very typical trip for me, in the sense that it wasn't very budget, it wasn't very rugged. It was actually a bit of a luxury. It was actually a bit of, I'm going to actually stay in an Airbnb, not lug it out in a dorm. But at the end of the day, South Africa just blows you away. It's just magic floating in front of your eyes at every corner. Driving there is just unbelievable, because every corner you take, it could be endless roads. You're driving 100 kilometers on the highway, but you could see zebras along, you could see mountains along sometimes, you could have these beautiful beaches come along all of a sudden. So the continuous change of landscapes, the continuous change of what you see in terms of animals to people, to towns, to cities, I think, to vineyards, and all of these different experiences. I think South Africa definitely is huge for me. But if I have to pick some of the other experiences, I really, in retrospect, I would say, loved my time in Mongolia, where I walked for 130 kilometers on the steppes. So it was like, I basically found a map, found a river path, and just walked along the river. It was really very interesting, because Mongolia doesn't have like restaurants and hotels or anything like that if you once leave the city. It's just plain grass, plain green steppes, vast kind of greenlands everywhere. And you can see shepherds with his or her herd, little nomadic homes once in a while, rivers and streams cutting through in the middle, some goats, maybe sometimes sheep, sometimes cows, and a lot of trees, of course. And that's Mongolia. So just actually packing a bag, getting a tent, putting some tuna cans and some pasta, and just getting to walk for 5 days on the steppes and meeting interesting people along the way who couldn't speak my language, who didn't know what I was doing, because I was just in the middle of nowhere. It leaves them also bewildered as to what I'm doing there. So it's quite an interesting experience. I had this one time, I was camping, and there was this truck that was trying to go through the steppes instead of the main road. I'm presuming they were giving some supplies to the nearby village or something, but the truck got stuck on the river, and I spent like a couple of hours, part of the effort of getting the truck out, And I got tired, so I just camped out there itself. And
Incredible.
these guys had beers on them, so they shared the beers and got my number. It was really interesting, and I had so many such experiences on the route. So it was tough, to be honest, to be out without a toilet or a roof or anything for so many days. But at the same time, it just pushed my mind and body to limits that I didn't know existed. So that's another experience that I would say is really special. And the last one I would say is Ethiopia, like I've already mentioned before, especially the Afar Triangle, which is like the far east of Ethiopia in the north. And that's kind of where it's also the planet's hottest place. The average temperatures along the year is the hottest there. It's just a great melange of colors, volcanoes, but also at the same time, it is the toughest place I've seen people live. The conditions are so harsh, so difficult. And they walk 13, 14 days with camels to just sell a block of salt, which pays them peanuts at the end of all of their effort. So just to be there and have this contrast of incredible beauty that blows you away, but also the reality that it is in this beauty that the worst of conditions lie for humankind. That was just a really special experience as well.
I think those are three incredible stories, and I'm sure there's many, many more. It'll take us more than half an hour or an hour to definitely decode that. But hopefully, we can keep reading those through your storytelling and journalism and the articles that you write. I guess one of the questions I had for you is, you very truly mentioned that you are a global citizen. You think of yourself as a global citizen, and which is why we have you on the Global Desi podcast. What is one common thing that you've seen across all the travels, right? Be it in people, be it in places. What is that commonality, right? We always look, especially in the world that we live in today, there's so many differences. People have differences of opinion, views, ideologies. Through your travels, what is that commonality that you have found, or is there a commonality, right? I guess, what have you learned from people when you travel?
Yeah, well, I definitely believe humans are the same wherever you go. How our conditions around us obviously change our views on things, and our philosophies and ideologies are, of course, different. But at the core of it, we are all the same. And I guess for me, the one thing that I feel is common around the world is the idea of love. I guess people understand that wherever you go, express it in different forms, of course. Like, you don't see an expression of love in India the way you would see it in France, for sure. But people want to express nonetheless, right? Everyone has the feeling of love and feels that emotion, whether it's for people or for places or for things. I'm not saying just like human to human love, like with the idea of loving something else. I think that is something, as an emotion, I feel is super common anywhere you go in the world. And I think that is something that truly connects us all as people. But the other factor is also the idea of trust, right? Like, we live in a community of trust. I mean, how much ever you look at it, the current virus scenario is an example, right? It's all on trust. You have to trust that somebody else is doing the right thing, and I can trust that. And I'll also try and do the right thing, and hence we'll be safe. And that's something you can see everywhere in the world, that people are very willing to trust. People are also very trustworthy, more often than not. I know one bad experience can ruin that for us, but more often than not, you would notice that people are very trustworthy and very trusting. So I think that's something I've also noticed around the world. I've gone that is something common among people from the global south to the north, to the east to the west.
That's lovely. I love how you laid down love and trust as the core tenets when you travel. I've experienced that as well every time I travel. Just the universal language, right? Like, you just fall into that as humans. It's beautiful. But I'd like to ask, like, what's on the flip side of that? Have you ever had like a bad experience, and can you share that with us? How bad was it?
There have been many experiences that I try to erase from my memory at some level. But I think most of it involves some sort of break of trust in some sense. But that's reality, and that's also what I mean by when I say trust. Like, you'll also see people breaking your trust, whether you're home or 1,000 miles away or 100,000 miles away. I mean, probably one of the worst ones was getting my wallet stolen in Barcelona in 2016. I lost my driver's license along with it, and I was supposed to drive around Spain from the next day. So I couldn't drive around Spain from the next day. And I had to completely change my trip to adjust to not having a car all of a sudden and only relying on public transport. And my original itinerary was very much going into the villages and stuff up in the north of Catalonia, but I couldn't because I didn't have a car, and these are not places with good public transport. So I had to just embrace the realities of it and just redo my itinerary and go to new places where I could actually get easily by public transport. And that's what I did. But at the same time, I do feel bad that all the months of planning I did for the places I really wanted to go couldn't happen. So that's probably one of the experiences that has a bit of taste in my mouth. But beyond that, I think most of it's been small incidents that I think I've already forgotten about.
Oh, and sounds like just adaptability sounds like a trait of a masterful slow traveler. So kudos to you on that, just like flipping the trip around.
Yeah, 100%.
To move on, like, what are you curious about right now? What's keeping you occupied? What's taking your brain space?
Well, I mean, honestly, a lot of things, but in the context of what we're speaking.
It could be different as well, just saying. So, yeah.
So I fundamentally, I think I'm in an inflection point in my life in many ways. I'm looking at venturing out of what I've been doing professionally to doing new things. That's one part of it. I'm hoping to spend more time writing more stories and going to more places that I've not had the opportunity of going, and places that I've been slightly more fearful of going as well. I'm trying to embrace that idea and actually just take the lead.
For example?
So I want to start. I want to go more to the west of Africa. That's something that's been on my mind for a while. I don't know why I haven't ever thought of it, and somehow that's never just been a place on my radar. But I think I want to bring that onto my radar and actually experience it more and more. And I think it's a great time to go because the world is yet to find it out. So it'll be in its raw form. It'll be clean. It'll be amazing.
Yeah, go before the world ruins it in terms of reviews and next place to go,
Absolutely. I mean, I was hearing the same thing about Mongolia, for example. The tourism is increasing 6x every year in Mongolia. So someone who went in 2000s to Mongolia would have a completely different story to tell you of a country that is completely off the radar and has nothing, to someone like me who went last year. But I can only imagine how worse it's going to get for someone else going 5 years
Same thing
down.
with Iceland, right? Iceland suddenly boomed in
After
the past few
Bollywood
years.
took it over.
Thanks to Bollywood as well.
Yeah, Bollywood as well. So yeah, I mean, I'm hoping to spend more time traveling to places that I've not thought about much in the past, and places that are less on the radar. And also, to be honest, I'm not a fan of war travel and stuff. I don't think that's a thing to glorify. But at the same time, as a storyteller, I'm very, very intrigued by the realities of life after war in these places, and how people are picking it back up, and what it has, and how those places feel like, and what life is like in those places. So I'm hoping to spend a little bit more time in places that are just that are out of the war and are trying to pick its ropes back up, because I'm sure there are so many lessons for us to learn from there. So that's something that I'm hoping I have the courage to and the drive to do soon. And that's something that's been keeping me occupied. And I also want to do stories around it. So from my love for writing as well as love for travel, I think that's something that I've been thinking a lot about, beyond obviously thinking about where next professionally. So yeah.
I think that was beautiful just listening to you share your stories. Like, I was literally imagining you at all these places, and it was gorgeous. So we're about at the end of our interview. Just to wrap it up, what makes you a global Desi? How do you identify as one?
Well, see, at the core of it, I was born and brought up in India. I speak like an Indian, I walk like an Indian, I talk like an Indian in many ways. I need my biryani. I need my
I know you love your
dosas
biryani,
and
man.
idlis. I need. Yeah. I do miss the food, and I miss the vibrancy of India a lot of times when I'm away. Just the colors and the craziness and the absolute chaos that it is. But there's beauty in its chaos. And I guess that's what makes me a global Desi, because wherever I go, I think I'm taking a part of this chaos and madness and colors and craziness with me. All of those things are actually me as well, as much as it's India. So, yeah, I would say that that's kind of what makes me a global Desi. I'm very identifiable wherever I go as an Indian. Like, not one person's ever guessed that wrong. That I could be from somewhere else. Be it how I look, to how I speak, to how I carry myself. So yeah.
That's lovely. I totally relate to that and totally vibe with that. I as a Hyderabadi, I love my biryani. So yeah.
Of course, you guys do.
Great. Vikas, what else would you like our listeners to know about you? Anything that you think we didn't, ask, or do you feel like anything else you want to share about slow travel itself, or in general?
I can't think of anything specific. I hope I have managed to share a little bit of my experience of slow traveling, and hopefully convince some people to slow travel as well, and to pick it on and see where that takes them. And I'm pretty sure it will feel great once you do it, and you're able to see the fruits of it.
That's awesome, and maybe you can never go back to mainstream traveling, right? So yeah, and I suppose in a lot of ways it's also sustainable, right? Right? I mean, I guess if you're taking less flights, you're staying at less places. Do you agree with that, or have you done any research on that?
That's true, Archana. I mean, I think that's one thing I probably didn't mention as such. But one of the things that happens when you're traveling on a quick tour of a place is you're hopping a lot of flights. And you're taking a lot of transport, and you're trying to do a lot of things. So, which means you're obviously spending a lot more resources and money, but you're also obviously leaving a higher carbon footprint. And honestly, as travelers, I find it a little bit hypocritical of talking about carbon footprint because I'm still traveling. But nonetheless, I think we all try to do the best we can and reduce it as much as we can. And I think slow traveling gives you the time to take the best mode of transport. That's economically feasible, that's conscious, and that's sustainable, as well as it lets you ensure that you're able to understand a place and its culture and its life, and kind of you adhere to that versus trying to force fit your style into a place, which might not be sustainable for that place. So, which happens a lot with travelers, right? Tourists, especially, who are quickly hopping in and out, they don't have the time to understand that this is not something that is agreeable in this culture, or the style in this culture. So you have to also change your ways here. But I'm guessing, for example, a slow traveler in Amsterdam probably has ridden more cycles in Amsterdam than someone who just came and went.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's the way of life, and you have to embrace that. And you can only do that if you're traveling slow. So I think there's all of these advantages from a sustainability point of view as well, and your contribution to the environment that makes slow travel even more alluring if it's not already.
Awesome. So on that note, everyone start taking sabbaticals and booking month-long trips all over the world.
I vouch for sabbaticals for sure.
Yeah.
Took one last year.
Great.
That's the best 3 months of my life.
Yeah, I feel like people really undervalue the importance of I guess just taking some time off, right? You could do whatever you want, and we just feel like we have to constantly keep working and continuously keep working. We do tie our identities a lot to work, right? And so these are ways in which we can try and bust some of those myths and, change that narrative. So yeah, more power to you, Vikas. Where can people find you on social media, and how can they get in touch with you?
Oh, well, yeah, this is the plug-in time, is it?
Absolutely. Because we want more people to find out about all the cool things that you do on,
So I'm mostly on Twitter and Instagram. On Instagram, you'll find a lot more of my travel stories, as well as my writing in words. I'm on beyondthewall.travel on Instagram. And on Twitter, I'm at the Sixth King. But
what's the
follow
story
me there
behind
if you,
that name?
I would rather not put it out on a public podcast, to be honest.
Okay.
All right. Maybe we'll
take
stop
it
the
offline.
It's quite embarrassing one. Yeah. But yeah, follow me on Twitter if you're willing to listen to my verbal vomit on politics and everything else as well, and a lot of sports. So much less travel on it, though.
Got it. That's amazing. And we'll make sure to link both Instagram and Twitter on our show notes. But Vikas, thank you so much for sharing all of these cool stories. I feel like with you, at least in this 30, 40-minute conversation, both Aarti and I, and hopefully a lot of listeners, have virtually traveled and experienced what you experienced at the core of your slow travel and your stories. I definitely felt like I was part of some of those. Yeah.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me, Archana Arti. This has been a pleasure for me to also relive some of my experiences.
Yay.
So, thank
Yeah,
you.
I feel like writing and talking about your travel takes you back to the travel, right? So, which is, I guess, part of also why we write. That's awesome. Thanks so much, Vikas, for sharing this.
Absolutely. Thank you.
And to our listeners, hope you enjoyed that and keep listening. And
Stay curious.
all right, peace out. Hey, Desis. If you enjoyed this episode, then please rate, review, and subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever else you're listening to podcasts.
And drop us a note on lifeofaglobalDesi@gmail.com or our social media to keep up this awesome dialogue.
Oh, and don't forget to give us a 5-star rating.
You're so cheap. Why are you asking them for 5-star ratings?
Well, I always ask for the rating I want, not the one I have. You know, like dress for the job you want, not the one you have.
That's like the stupidest thing I've heard all day.
Arti, you're so judgmental. You need to stop being
Listen,
judgmental.
I just think you can't be so demanding. That's all.
You ask for what you want.
Bleh.